I should have known something was off the moment the plane touched down in Singapore. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. Maybe it was the way Daniel avoided holding my hand as we walked through immigration, or the fact that he insisted on carrying his laptop like it was more valuable than the engagement ring he'd given me just 3 months earlier. We weren't even married yet. But I'd already said goodbye to my job, my apartment in Sao Paulo, my mother who cried on the doorstep, and the life I'd built piece by piece over 30 years. All for him. All because he said he had a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and wanted me there beside him. Mariana, he'd said, I can't do this without you. And so I moved. I told myself it was love. That this was what partners did. That starting over in a new country would be an adventure. But love should never feel like disorientation. Like losing yourself in someone else's ambition. Within weeks I was a shadow. Daniel was always at work, supposedly building something big in fintech with a few college friends. He came home late, smelled like cologne I didn't own, and answered emails during dinner. Cooked for him. Did the visa paperwork. Set up our tiny apartment overlooking the MRT tracks like a real home. He kissed my forehead and said, "Thanks, babe." Like I was a helpful assistant. Not a woman who gave up everything for him. The worst part. I started shrinking myself to fit into the mold he carved for me. I wore the dresses he liked. Spoke softly when we were with his colleagues. I pretended not to notice the second toothbrush in his gym bag. I told myself it was easier to be cool than confront him. I didn't want to be that woman. The jealous one. The foreigner who didn't get it. Then came the night that changed everything. It was Friday, humid, and I had made makika, the Brazilian fish stew he used to beg me to make back when we were dating. Waited. Lit candles. Even put on red lipstick. He never showed. By midnight I checked his location. He had forgotten I still had access. He was at a rooftop bar. I got dressed. Took the elevator down. Told myself I just needed to see him. That maybe I was wrong. That it was a work thing. A misunderstanding. Something explainable. But what I saw on that rooftop erased every excuse I had built for him. He was laughing, throwing his head back, cocktail in hand, eyes locked with hers. A woman in a gold silk dress. She touched his chest like she owned it. He kissed her like I didn't exist. I didn't cry. Not then. I turned around, walked 3 blocks, sat on a bench at Raffles Place, and stared at my own reflection in the glass wall of some corporate building. It hit me then. I was just another detail he'd outsourced. Another logistical convenience. By Sunday I was packed. I didn't tell him. I just left. Not back to Brazil, no. That would have been too easy for him. Clean ending. A story where he could say I gave up. Instead, I moved into a hostel on Haji Lane, surrounded by artists and solo travelers who thought I was brave. I wasn't brave. I was broken. I took odd jobs, helping at a local cafe, doing translations, tutoring Brazilian teens in English via Zoom. I tried not to think of him. But you don't just erase someone you moved across the planet for. You carry their betrayal like an invisible backpack. Heavy, constant, unspoken. And then I met Eleanor. I was at a legal information session for expats, mostly about work permits and tenancy rights. I was only there for the free AC and coffee. But Eleanor walked in like a scene from a noir film. Sleek black suit, silver streak in her hair, eyes like she could see through lies. She spoke with precision, confidence. She wasn't like the others. At the end of the session, she said something that caught my ear. Many people think they're powerless in foreign countries. But law doesn't care about nationality. Cares about documentation. If someone signs something, it can be enforced. That night I stayed after. I waited until everyone left and then approached her with a shaky voice. "I think I was taken advantage of," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Think." I told her everything. move, the isolation, the cheating, but more importantly, the paperwork. How Daniel had asked me to sign a stack of documents when we first arrived. Just some standard relocation stuff, he'd said. One of them had my name, his company's name, and something about asset liability in case of legal disputes. She asked for copies. I still had them in my email. She read through the PDF on my phone, and her lips curled into something between a smile and a smirk. "He really didn't read this, did he?" she said. "This clause right here. Mariana, do you realize what you have?" I stared at her, confused. She handed the phone back to me, tapped the screen, and said, "He just made you a legal co-founder." My heart dropped. "No, he didn't. That can't be. Singapore corporate law is very specific. If this was filed with the company's incorporation documents, and your name's on it, you're not just his girlfriend. You're part owner." I didn't sleep that night. The next day we met again. Eleanor brought her laptop, and I brought the receipts. Every message, email, file Daniel ever sent me. She opened a bottle of wine mid-afternoon and said, "We're not just going to walk away from this. We're going to walk into it." By the end of the week, she had a plan. And for the first time since that rooftop, I felt something other than pain. Felt power. I spent the next few weeks hiding in plain sight. Every morning, I'd walk past the glass towers of the CBD like any other commuter, blending in. Invisible. Just another woman with earbuds and a tote bag. But while the rest of the world scrolled TikTok and podcasts, I was listening to Eleanor coach me through the maze of legal steps Daniel never dreamed I'd navigate. He'd underestimated me. He'd mistaken quiet for weak. But what he didn't know, and what Eleanor reminded me again and again, was that leverage doesn't scream. It whispers. The first step was simple. Confirm the clause. Eleanor pulled records from ACRA, Singapore's business registry, and confirmed it. My name was there. I was listed as a non-operating co-founding contributor under his fintech firm, Bridgevault Technologies. His lawyer probably thought it was just a technicality, a gesture of goodwill, a way to fast-track some of the visa paperwork and gain foreign incentive credits. But in Eleanor's hands, that technicality became a loaded weapon. "With the right timing," she said, tapping her glass of iced coffee, "we won't need to expose him in court. We'll do it where it hurts more. His image, his funding, his future." The plan wasn't just to sue him. It was to step in as his equal, as the woman whose name was on the founding paperwork, and demand what was legally mine. Quietly, surgically, with zero warning. That's where things got complicated. Bridgevault was about to close a major funding round with a group of US investors. Daniel had bragged about it on LinkedIn. I didn't even have to stalk. His ego was doing all the announcing for me. Timing was critical. If I filed too early, he could restructure. Too late, and I'd lose leverage. So we bided our time. While I waited, I played the part. I got a job as a freelance translator for a corporate consulting firm, pretending to be rebuilding my life. Meanwhile, Eleanor prepared the documents. A formal notice of equity claim, a cease and desist order in case they tried to remove my name, and a press release, just in case we needed to go nuclear. But I wasn't ready for what came next. One night, Eleanor handed me a thin file. Inside, a contract amendment Daniel had filed 6 weeks after our move. One that removed my name quietly, citing non-performance. It was a betrayal buried in legalese. "But how?" I stammered. "Can he do that without my signature?" Eleanor shook her head. "Not legally. But he's betting you won't fight it. He's betting you're still heartbroken." I wasn't. I was furious. And fear, I'd learned, only worked on people who had something left to lose. Me. I'd already lost everything. My job, my relationship, my country, my pride. What was left to take? I signed the papers Eleanor gave me. A formal notice of breach. a demand for reinstatement, and a claim for 20% ownership retroactively from the company's launch, plus damages. The document was sent directly to Bridgevault's investors. 2 days later, Daniel called me. I didn't pick up. Then came the text. Daniel, what is this? Daniel, you're confused. Daniel, we can talk. Daniel, Eleanor. Really? You're making a mistake. I didn't reply, because the next phase had already begun. Eleanor arranged a meeting with the investors, not to warn them but to introduce me. When we walked into the penthouse suite where they were staying, I wore a tailored navy dress and heels that made me feel like my spine was made of steel. Eleanor called it my power armor. The lead investor, a woman in her 60s named Abigail, looked at me over her glasses and said, "So, you're that Mariana?" Smiled. The one who helped fund the early days, did the overseas transition work, and brought in the contact for the firm's payment integration deal? Yes, that's me. Eleanor slid over the documents. Abigail read in silence. Then, "You know, Daniel said you left because you couldn't handle the pressure." I didn't blink. Did he also say I drafted the original onboarding framework? Because it looks like he resubmitted it with my name scrubbed out. Another investor chuckled under his breath. Eleanor finished her coffee. "Let's not pretend this is just about fairness," she said. "It's about optics. If this goes public, your fund will be associated with a founder who cut out his own partner, and not just romantically. Legally." Abigail nodded. "Leave it with us." We left. 2 days passed. Then 3. On the 4th morning I got the email. Subject: Bridgevault Equity Dispute. Amended Terms Proposal. The investors had intervened. Daniel was being forced to reinstate me as co-founder. And I wasn't just getting a seat at the table. I was getting back pay, a share buyout option, and a public announcement stating that I had been instrumental to the company's foundation and success. I sat on the floor of my hostel room, blinking at the screen. I didn't cry. I laughed, because Daniel didn't just lose the upper hand. He lost control of the narrative. But Eleanor wasn't done. "We have one more move," she said. "The public debut." "What do you mean?" "You're going to speak at their product launch as co-founder." Froze. "I can't. He'll never agree." "He already did," she said, handing me the confirmation email. "He doesn't get a choice. His investors insisted on it." I stared at the screen. My name on the official list. Mariana Souza, co-founder of Bridgevault Technologies. There would be press. There would be cameras. There would be him standing 5 feet away. And there would be me, finally unafraid. The Bridgevault product launch was set for a Friday evening, held in one of Singapore's sleekest venues, a glass-walled rooftop space at Marina Bay, overlooking the skyline Daniel had always bragged about conquering. When I arrived, I wore white. Not black, not navy white. Unapologetically bright. Clean. Dark. The irony was delicious. I'd worn white on the day I moved across the world for him, believing in a future he had no intention of protecting. And now I wore it again. But this time I wasn't here as his girlfriend. I was here as his equal. Legally. Publicly. Unstoppably. The room buzzed with people. Investors, journalists, tech influencers, and startup junkies hungry for the next unicorn. Daniel was already there, pacing in the corner in a fitted suit. His signature smirk faltering every time someone glanced toward me instead of him. He approached as I was checking my notes near the podium. "Mariana," he said under his breath. "You've made your point." I looked at him calmly. "No. I've made my entrance." He leaned in closer. "Do you even know what you're doing up there? This isn't your world." Smiled. "It is now. You handed it to me, remember?" Before he could respond, a voice boomed over the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, we now welcome to the stage Mariana Souza, co-founder of Bridge Vault Technologies. Applause erupted. Daniel stepped back. I walked forward. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. I looked out over the crowd, the city lights glinting behind them, and began. Good evening. My name is Mariana Souza. I am proud to stand here today. Not because I was invited, but because I earned this place. When Bridge Vault was founded, it wasn't just code and pitch decks. It was long nights, relocation paperwork, international logistics, and blind trust. That last part was mine. But trust, like equity, must be honored. The room went still. Journalists raised their phones. Cameras clicked. I glanced at Daniel. He had gone rigid. We often talk about innovation as if it only lives in ideas. But sometimes the most revolutionary act is accountability. Today, Bridge Vault launches its new product. And today, it also corrects an old omission. I was a silent partner. But silence was never consent. And now, I speak not just for myself, but for every woman whose work was rewritten under someone else's name. There was a beat of stunned silence. Then applause, slow, strong, growing. As I stepped down, the event staff ushered Daniel up for his part of the presentation. His hands were shaking. Eleanor met me near the exit, her arms crossed, watching the chaos behind me like a painter admiring her finished work. That was surgical, she said. I meant every word. I know. That's what made it lethal. She handed me a folder. Inside was the final signed settlement. Effective that day. I was now officially bought out at 5 times the original estimate. I had shares, a seat on the advisory board, and my name in the company's founding records. For life. But that wasn't the real twist. The real twist came weeks later. I was back in Brazil, sitting with my mother in our little garden in Sao Paulo, when I got an email from Eleanor. Subject line: Our next project. Attached was a proposal. She wanted me to co-found something with her. A legal consultancy for women navigating international partnerships, marriages, and contracts abroad. A lifeline for those who didn't have an Eleanor to guide them. I stared at the screen for a long time. Because somehow the story had turned again. This wasn't about Daniel anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about building something real, with someone who saw me not as a sidekick, not as a supporter, but as a force of my own. I replied with one word. Mariana sits on a panel at a women's leadership summit in Lisbon, dressed in white again. The moderator asks, looking back, if you could speak to the woman you were when you landed in Singapore, what would you say to her? She smiles. I'd tell her the truth. That she thought she moved across the world for a man. But really, she moved across the world to meet herself. Fade out. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.